What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G in 2022. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite accessories. So definitely check that out as well. But with that being said, let's get into it. So my first reason to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G in 2022 is the display. So with this phone, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz PLS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 400, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 82.5% screen to body ratio. So in general, for a phone in this price range, this is really going to be the perfect device for consuming content. To start off, at 6.6 inches, while not being quite as large as something like a Moto G stylus for example, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is still definitely on the larger side, and this tends to be a good thing when you're consuming a lot of content. In addition to this, with an aspect ratio of 20:9, we are getting a pretty tall and narrow form factor here, so if you're doing something like watching a video or playing a game in landscape mode for example, you're going to get a more immersive experience, and if you're doing something vertical like browsing the web, you can fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. We also of course got a 1080p resolution, so the image is really sharp, another great thing for consuming content, and if that wasn't enough, with a 120Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, and while you probably can't tell a whole lot in this video, if you're doing something like watching a video, playing a game, really anything with a lot of motion on the screen, you are going to get a smoother, more fluid experience, and even when you're just using the phone in general, it is going to feel a little bit more premium. And even when it comes to the image quality itself, the colors are nice and vibrant, the brightness is good, and for being just a PLS LCD display instead of an AMOLED or anything like that, the viewing angles are also decent as well. But that being said, keep in mind, while this display is really good for what it is, one downside here is that if you're in a really bright area, like outside in the sun for example, I have noticed in that situation when you're in landscape mode, it is a little bit harder to see, so if you live in a really bright area, or you're going to be outside a lot, definitely keep this in mind. But other than that, honestly, for being a $300 phone, I do think the display on this phone is really good. My second reason to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is the camera. Now with this phone, we got an 8 megapixel front facing camera, then on the back, we got a full quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, this phone has pretty much all the features, including an ultra wide camera and a macro camera. So whether you want to get close up detailed images, or maybe you're taking vacation photos, scenery pictures, or even just a group photo and you want to fit more content into the frame, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G has the features to do it all. And aside from just having the features, the photo quality itself is also really good, and while it's still not going to be nearly as good as a $1,400 flagship phone for example, if you're taking a lot of photos, you'll want a wider variety of features, you want the pictures to look really nice, but at the same time you don't need the absolute top of the line quality. In that kind of situation, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G definitely has the camera setup to get the job done. Now my third reason to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G in 2022 is the processor. With this phone in particular, this is definitely a big one, because despite it being pretty entry level as far as the price goes, I feel like when it comes to performance, you are getting a lot more than you pay for here. So with this phone, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. Now keep in mind, this phone in my hand is the US version, and the international model does have 6GB of RAM instead, but in the US, pretty much any version of this phone you get through a carrier will have 4GB of RAM. Now that being said, I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and here are the results right here. Now in case you're not too familiar with this test, I do recommend running it on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be an upgrade for you, because depending on what kind of device you're coming from, it may or may not be. If you're coming from another mid-range phone or even an entry-level phone, chances are this will most likely be a pretty significant upgrade, but if you're coming from an older flagship phone for example, like the Samsung Galaxy S10, or even an upper-end mid-range phone like an A52 5G, then the difference might not be so big. But that being said, in my experience, I have done a decent amount of stuff with this phone, from web browsing to content consumption to mobile gaming, and everything has run really well. I will say with the higher end games, it does struggle a little bit, which is pretty expected for any phone that's not a flagship phone, but it still can do that stuff. So if you are planning on being on your phone a decent amount, but you're still not really a power user who needs the absolute top of the line processing power, I would say in general, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will give you a good experience. And again, unless you're looking for a really top of the line flagship level experience, when it comes to performance, you're really not going to go wrong with this phone. My fourth reason to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G in 2022 is the headphone jack. Now this might sound a little weird if you're not too familiar with the new Samsung Galaxy A series phones, but most of the higher end ones don't actually have headphone jacks, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we do actually get a normal 3.5mm headphone jack. And while for a lot of people, not having a headphone jack probably won't be a deal breaker, when you compare this phone to something like the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G for example, sure, a case could be made that the A33 5G is a little little bit of a step up, but honestly the difference in features isn't huge. Sure, the A23 5G has stuff like an AMOLED display for example, and maybe a slightly higher quality camera, but really with the A23 5G, the performance is really similar, and a lot of the features are pretty much the same as well. So overall, if you are looking for a phone that has a lot of higher end A-series qualities, like a great display, really good performance, and a good camera setup, but you also don't want to lose the headphone jack, then this phone is going to be a great choice. And finally, my fifth reason to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G in 2022 is the battery. With this phone, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 25 watt fast charging. So first of all, with a 5000 mAh battery, as of right now, that's pretty much the largest battery you can get in a smartphone, at least in the US, so you can expect to get great battery life and longevity here. In addition to this, with 25 watt fast charging, the charging speeds on this phone, if you have the right fast charger, are going to be great, and in my experience, this does actually save quite a bit of time. Now that being said, when it comes to fast charging, keep in mind if you don't have a strong enough fast charger, you're not going to be able to take full advantage of this. And in case you didn't know, most standard wall adapters are only like 5 watts, maybe 10, so most of them are probably not going to be strong enough to fully utilize this phone's fast charging. So keep in mind, in order to do this, you will need a 25 watt fast charger, and in case you don't have one, I will be linking to my favorite one in the video description. Not only is it more than strong enough to charge this phone, but it's also really affordable, so if you are interested, definitely check that out as well. But those were my 5 reasons to buy the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G in 2022. In general, for what it is, despite a few drawbacks that I will be talking about in another video, I really do think this is a great phone for the money, and especially considering the current carrier deals, which you can find in the video description, this is probably one of the best phones you can get in this price range. Now, once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, so definitely check that out as well. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.